Desfrute do novo Icon of the Seas da Royal Caribbean agora partindo de Miami. É o ícone das férias repleto de atrações, com o maior parque aquático no mar e espetáculos sensacionais da Broadway. Com destinos incríveis no Caribe, incluindo a premiada ilha particular Perfect Day at Coco Cay, a aventura nunca acaba. Icon of the Seas, as melhores férias em família do mundo. Acesse royalcaribbean.com/BRA. Aplicam-se termos e condições.
Hello and welcome to Happier, a podcast where we talk about ideas, resources, research, and strategies about how to make our lives happier. This week, we'll talk about why it's helpful to have challenging conversations while walking. And Elizabeth and I will report about what we learned from our No Spend February. I'm Gretchen Rubin, a writer who studies happiness, habits, the five senses, human nature. I'm in my little home office here in New York City, and joining me today from LA is my sister Elizabeth Kraft. And Elizabeth, we have had many conversations, challenging and not so challenging, while walking.
That's me, Elizabeth Kraft, a TV writer and producer living in LA. And yeah, Gretch, that's probably my favorite time to talk, is while walking.
Before we launch in, we have a few updates from listeners.
Yes, this comes from Abigail. She said, I'm listening to episode 470 and you're suggesting trying some new food, music, etc. by the age of 25. Well, I'm more than 20 years older than that cutoff age. And so I thought of this as try it by 25, as in try it before 2025 next year. If you're an obliger like me and need outer accountability, maybe this is something you could team up with a friend to do. My plan is to find a smoke-free billiards hall here where we live in Japan and take my husband. I've never played before, and I'm imagining it as a perfect ratio of zen and competition. It's also on my 24 for 24 list already.
I love that. Instead of try it by 25, it's try it by 2025.
Yes, I can't believe we didn't think of that, Gretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to let people know my paperback is coming. A lot of people prefer to read paperbacks, or maybe you just haven't gotten around to buying your copy of Life in Five Senses yet. The paperback will hit the shelves on April 30th. As always, pre-ordering really helps the book, so I really, really appreciate it if you pre-order. And as a little thank you to people who do pre-order, I am going to give a secret chapter of the book. There was a chapter that I wrote. I worked hard on it. I did some interesting research about it, but it was ultimately taken out of the final cut. So if you are intrigued by that secret chapter, if you go to happiercast.com/secret chapter, you can show that you ordered the paperback and get the download for that. And by the way, if you've already bought the hardback, there's a way to say, hey, I already bought the hardback, because I wouldn't want somebody who bought the hardback not to be able to get this if they wanted. So that is very fun.
Yeah, yes. I love that.
Yeah. So this week, our try this at home suggestion is to have a hard conversation while walking. So if you have to have a stressful conversation or you're talking about a difficult subject, try having that conversation while you're walking with someone.
Yeah, Gretch, I know for me, it works so well to talk while walking. You'll even remember back when I started on my treadmill desk, which you gave me, best gift ever, I would like to walk while getting notes, because that's difficult for me. And even the act of walk, that's different from what we're talking about, but it's the same thing where walking makes it easier to receive.
Well, I think that not for all of the same reasons, but for many of the same reasons, it is effective. And I think part of it, and this would be true whether you were like walking outside in nature, which has its own benefits, or you're in your home office walking on your treadmill, is I think it gives stress an outlet.
Yeah.
I think you too, we get kind of physically agitated, kind of like worked up and restless and high strung in that way. And when you're walking, that energy, that nervous, restless, uncomfortable energy has an outlet. And so it's not pooling up in your body, but it's just, there's a way for it to like come out. And I think that helps you to stay calm, because that electricity isn't building up in an uncomfortable way. So that would work. That's probably part of why that was helpful for you.
Yes, For sure. And one thing we should point out with this, Gretchen, is I do think it's good to tell a person ahead of time,
Yes.
warn them, hey, can we
Yes.
talk about X subject on our
Yes.
walk today or while we walk the dog?
Yes.
Because you don't necessarily want to just surprise somebody with a difficult
Yes.
conversation.
Right, where they feel like they didn't know what was coming. And that's probably good about the notes call. It's like, you know that the notes call is going to be
Yes,
stressful.
that's true.
So you're like,
Yes.
okay, I'm doing this knowing that it's going to be stressful. Right. But if you're going on a walk, you don't want one person to think like this is going to be a pleasant run around the neighborhood with our dog. And then you're like, okay, I'm hitting you with this big subject that we've been avoiding. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah.
One of the things I also think that's useful about it is that you're walking side to side. And it's interesting how often people find it easier to talk or to be revealing or vulnerable or persist in difficult conversations when they're not face to face. And one of the places this often comes up is in parenting advice, where they often say teenagers are often more, they will disclose more, they'll be more confiding, they'll have more difficult conversations when you're in the car. Because there's something about you're sort of on your way someplace, you're not face to face, there's something else happening, and that tends to be a really good time to have conversations with teenagers. And so I do think there's something you can feel on the spot. It can feel confrontational. Some people feel uncomfortable when someone's right up there. But when you're walking, being side to side gives you more of a feeling of freedom and not being in the spotlight so much.
I also think just it's very subtle, but I think when you're walking together, you've made a decision to be somewhere together. So it's like there's at least something here that you agree on. You know, if you're having a conversation that has conflict in it, it's like, well, we're here together doing this. So we're kind of already on the same side.
Well, and you're moving together, like you're
Yes.
literally moving through the world together. And so that is also kind of a harmonious pattern. I didn't even think of that, but I think that that's right, that itself is sort of a harmonious behavior that maybe subtly
Yes.
supports a conversation where maybe you're pulling in different directions.
Yeah. And Gretchen, I mean, I think people do confide. It's not necessarily a difficult conversation, but you confide more when you're walking. Like,
Yes.
I hike with my friends, and we often call it hiking therapy. And that's when we talk about stuff going on in our lives that we wouldn't necessarily talk about, like at a party or a dinner out. But when we're walking, we find ourselves sharing all sorts of stuff.
That's so true. I find that as well, that I'm more likely to confide more. I don't know why. Maybe it just feels there's sort of a privacy and intimacy, but also an openness to it. It's an environment where you feel good to confide. You know, also the thing about it is if you're on a walk together, it's quiet. I mean, in that people are not interrupting you. And there's sort of the focus of like, we're doing this together for a certain amount of time, but you're also not trapped. And I think sometimes with a difficult conversation, people sometimes feel claustrophobic and they feel like they want to escape, but this gives you this feeling of openness. And yet they are kind of stuck with you. So they can't just exit because you're like, okay, we're on this walk together. And so it's sort of this nice balance of, okay, you're here with me and like you got to write it out, but also there's a feeling of openness. So I think that creates an environment where it's not too much one direction or the other.
Yeah, and there's a natural conclusion usually to a walk. You're doing a certain, whether it's Fryman Canyon or you have your loop around the neighborhood with your dog, whatever it is. And so then you're not getting also stuck in the conversation on and on and on. It's like, okay, now the walk is done and we can conclude this.
No, I think it's often very helpful to have a natural sense of the pacing of a conversation. So again, sometimes people will do this in a restaurant because in a restaurant, there's a natural pace to a restaurant meal. And so you know that it's not going to be 3 hours unless you're at like a super fancy restaurant. And so that gives you a sense of pacing. And again, with the hiking, it's like we're moving toward a conclusion. And so if it's an uncomfortable conversation, people know you're not going to like try to keep me talking about this for 6 hours because at a certain point, we're going to reach the end. And I do think that often helps. And maybe that's why the car ride is good too with the teenagers. Is they know, okay, we're headed to the mall. And when we get to the mall, we'll get out and we'll do something different. But in this period, I feel comfortable having this conversation with you because I know that it will come to a natural end. It's not just going to be as long as you want to talk to me about it, Mom.
Yeah.
Which might be a lot much longer than they want.
Longer, yes.
Yes. So I think and then there's just, if you're outside, it's just helpful to be outside. The fresh air, if you have sunlight, the sunlight in our eyes gives us a boost. It gives us energy. It's good for our bodies. If we're moving, that itself, it gives us more energy, but it also calms us down. It boosts our mood. It boosts even things like our immunity. If we're out and about, we're seeing things, we're experiencing the world. That's all the five senses coming into play. Fresh air, all these things. There's so much about it that could contribute to making a difficult conversation go more easily for both people. So let us know if you do try this at home and how walking during a challenging conversation works for you. Have you done it in the past? Are you going to try it in the future? Let us know on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Facebook. Drop us an email at podcast@GretchenRubin.com. Or as always, you can go to the show notes. This is happiercast.com/472 for everything related to this episode.
Coming up, we have a pairing hack, but first, this break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run or maybe do yoga, meditate, watch an extra TV show, spend time with your family? Well, one way to really figure out your priorities in life is to go to therapy. I know in my life, Gretchen, whenever I've been in therapy, I've had such a clear vision of what is important to me and how to move forward and how to get in the things that I want to do.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/GretchenRubin today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/GretchenRubin. Okay, now for a happiness hack, and this is from a listener who is using one of our favorite strategies. There are 21 strategies of habit change. Some are more popular and more universal than others, and the strategy of pairing is very popular.
Yes, this comes from Allison. She says, thought you might like to know I'm utilizing 2 of your suggested strategies for building better habits. 1, the strategy of pairing. I have one game on my phone, which is a crossword game. I now play it only with my non-dominant hand. I use just my left hand. And if I want to play, I must use my left hand. This helps me tap into benefits of using my, quote, wrong hand. 2, simultaneously, this means I'm using the strategy of inconvenience because it requires more focused energy and more effort to use my left hand to play this game. I'm less likely to spend too much time doing it. Clever.
Yeah, this is really interesting. She's like inserted the strategy of inconvenience into the strategy of pairing.
Yes.
In a very elegant way. And I think this is a great idea. It's like, yeah, you can play that game if you want, but it's going to be harder.
Yes.
So again, you're not saying no to yourself. Some people don't like to say no to yourselves, but by adding a hurdle to it and using the strategy of pairing as a way to make that hurdle stick, it's just making it that much more challenging, and therefore it's that much easier to put it down and do something else. So people often say, like, I don't have enough time to change all these habits. It's like sometimes they don't take any time, any additional time. It's just how you set something up. So very, very clever.
Yes. And then, Gretch, we have a bonus hack from Lena. She says, I'm listening to episode 466 right now in the car, and I just got to the part where you were talking about what to do with conference lanyards. My mother has come up with a great solution to this one. She and her friends love to go camping in nature and also at music festivals, and she clips little flashlights to the lanyards so that everyone can have a flashlight around their neck and not have trouble finding their way back to the tent or out to the bathroom during the trip. Things have a tendency to get dirty, broken, or lost at camping trips, so they sort of organically get used up, and she restocks with my new conference lanyards every year. I mean, Gretchen, fantastic idea.
Fantastic. And I can imagine someone doing this if like they walk their dogs when the nights are really long and you just want to slip it around your neck or, stick it in the car. So if you need it, I would never have thought of my conference lanyard as a flashlight vehicle. But what a great idea.
I love it.
I love this idea.
It's awesome.
That's great. And now for a Know Yourself Better. Elizabeth, what did we learn about ourselves from No Spend February. And you doubled down on No Spend February, right?
Right. Because we also did No Spend February over on Happier in Hollywood. Sarah and I did it, and we'll talk about it there as well. So, yeah, I was all about No Spend February. Of course, Gretchen, we're so lucky that we're able to choose to do a No Spend February, that it is, not something we're forced to do because of circumstance.
Right. Some people aren't spending because they don't have any money. And so
Yeah.
we're very, very fortunate that this was our choice to make. But Elizabeth, we did do this, and it was a very interesting experience. Neither one of us had ever done anything like this before. So it's always interesting to deprive ourselves of something that's customary. Because I think it is a really good way to know yourself, because by briefly just depriving ourselves of something, we're more aware of how much time and energy it takes, how much mental effort we're devoting to it. And it's a good way to reset our tolerances, because sometimes I think when we deprive ourselves of something, then when we come back to it, we might do it less, or we might do it in a different way because we've learned what it's like to give it up altogether.
And it makes us aware of our patterns, because a lot of times we're not even aware of what we're doing. I think that's very true with spending.
Yes.
That's why people who help with finances always tell people to look at their budget and actually look what they're spending money on, because often you don't even realize it.
You don't realize it. Well, and also our approach this month reminds me of the abstainer moderator, a distinction which we've talked about before. And people are different. Even the same individual probably is a mix of abstainer and moderator, depending on different behavior. But the idea is that for an abstainer with certain temptations, it's easier to give something up altogether. Sometimes it's just easier to say none, never, no, and just cross something off the list altogether, rather than to try to be moderate, which is when you say, oh, I'm going to do it less, or I'm going to do it sometimes, or I'm going to do it some days. For some things, there can be a lot of decision fatigue around that. There's a lot of having to now, later, today, tomorrow, does this count? With moderation. And so sometimes it's just easier to do something just to give it up altogether. And there is something kind of, I don't know that it's exciting, but there's something really interesting about just stopping something altogether. So I think for both of us, we were sort of interested going all the way rather than let's just do it a little bit. That wouldn't have been as interesting as just trying to have no spend February, like doing a very dramatic, bold step. Sometimes the bold step is more interesting and engaging than something that somebody might be like, well, it's more realistic. You're like, but it's not as much fun.
Well, Gretch, I learned, and I mentioned this when we started, that I really do spend a lot of time browsing online stores, mostly sales, but also not sales too. And it was really nice to save a lot of time, because part of my thing was when I get these emails of oh, there's a sale here, a sale there, I'm not even going to look. I'm just going to delete the email.
Yeah.
So I did realize that I saved a lot of time. But I will say not doing it made me want to do it. By the end of the month, I was really wanting to buy stuff.
Well, that's interesting, because often you are more of a browser than you're a buyer. You're kind of an underbuyer, but you're somebody who likes the poking around.
Well, maybe I actually want to just browse. And if I browse, I won't actually buy, but I have that desire maybe, now that you say it, maybe my desire really is to browse. But I do feel like going shopping, March 1st, I'm like, oh, I could go shopping now. And I never go shopping. Now, will I actually go? Doubtful.
Well, that's so interesting that the browsing itself is an activity. But it's interesting because you're saying the browsing is the activity that you want. So if you were worried about not wanting to shop, you could say, okay, I'll let myself browse, but I won't let myself buy. But if you're saying that one of the things that you enjoyed saving was the time, then you are spending the time on it. But if you value that time, then it's well, this is an activity that I like. And so maybe the thing is this is actually a legitimate activity that I'm going to say, this is a thing I like to do, just like you might like to play Tetris on your phone, or you might like to watch a TV show or read a book. It's this is just a little activity I like to do during my day, because I think it's kind of a non-activity. I think it's sort of an unclassified non-activity.
Scrolling, yeah.
Yeah. But maybe it is something that you enjoy, because otherwise I would say maybe you just delete all the newsletters so that you don't even see it. But maybe that's an activity that you like, so you like getting the emails.
Well, Gretch, it did occur to me this month to do that, to unsubscribe from all these places, and I did not.
Okay.
I was like, well, I want to get these when the month is over. So I need to think about it. I'm not
Yeah, because
sure where I land.
it's an activity that you enjoy.
Yeah.
It's funny though that it's the looking and not the buying so much. And this reminds me, this is one thing that really surprised me when I heard about it, which is that what some people do is they'll go on and they'll fill up their cart and then they'll just abandon it.
I do that all the time.
See, that's so interesting. Apparently a huge percentage of abandoned carts, people never intended to buy them. It's just like people like the kind of choosing and the picking and the curating, but it's a pleasure completely separate from buying. I think that this is really understood.
Yes.
It's not widely understood, this aspect, because it isn't acquisition.
Right.
The point is not to get the stuff. It's a different kind of pleasure.
Yes.
But so you felt like doing this almost made you want to buy more because by not browsing, you're like, I actually want to pull the trigger on the cart.
I kind of do, but maybe now that I could pull the trigger, I won't feel the need. So we'll see how it plays
Like,
out.
when you
in the
actually
next
follow
few
through.
Weeks. Yes.
Right. Because you are kind of an underbuyer. So I could see you just being like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Now that I can do it.
So what do you think the long-term consequences, if any, will be of doing this exercise?
Well, I mean, one thing is with the ordering food, that was my other big area.
Right, yes. What about the ordering food?
That was much harder. And I have to say, I broke my promise not to order food several times.
Okay.
Now, I still ordered much less than I normally would. So I really did realize, wow, I do this way too much. I knew it, but then again, looking at my patterns, it really confirmed it. So I'm really glad that I did that. And I'm going to make a concerted effort to order less often moving forward.
So it helped in certain areas, but it was less helpful in other areas.
Yes.
Or maybe it raised intriguing questions for you to ponder.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
How about you, Gretchen? How did it go for you?
Well, one thing for me is I realize that I do buy a lot of books very impulsively. So I always check the library. Unlike you, Elizabeth, if it's a book that I haven't read, I really do want a physical book. I don't want an audiobook or an ebook. I want a physical book. So if my library has it, and I belong to a great library, I'll get it from the library. And I love when I can get it from the library because I can just get anything from the library, look at it for 1 second, and then if I don't like it, I just return it. And so I always try the library first. But a lot of things aren't at the library. And I'm like, and I don't even remember why. Like, I get these books and I'm like, why was I thinking? It's like somebody recommended it. And so I think that I will end up buying fewer books because I'm not buying them so impulsively. But like, here's an example of a book, how I would have done it. So I was reading a book, which I highly recommend, called Missing May by Cynthia Rylant, children's literature book, so good, highly recommend. And the main character mentioned loving the work of Phyllis Whitney.
Okay.
And what I've learned is if in a novel a character mentions an author, it's because the author of the novel that I'm reading simply cannot resist drive-by praise. And so I'm like, who is Phyllis Whitney? Well, it turns out she was this hugely popular author who had written many books, and she twice won an award from the Mystery Writers of America for Best Juvenile Novel. So I'm like, I must read Mystery of the Haunted Pool. My library didn't have it, so now it's on my wish list. And so in the past, I would have just ordered it, and probably by the time it came, I'm like, why am I reading Mystery of the Haunted Pool? I don't really like mysteries. But now, because I've sort of had this delay and I have a note on my list, I think when I get it, I will remember it better. So I think it will slow me down.
Good.
And help me remember why I've gotten certain books.
And then was there other stuff that you would have bought normally and you went, wait, it's no spend February. I'm not going to buy this.
Yes. I saw an ad on YouTube, which I think a lot of people have seen, for a fire blanket. And I was just like, this thing looks amazing. And I did spend a lot of time like, are these things real or are they not real? Kind of hard to tell. But I didn't buy one, but I think I will buy one.
Okay.
I definitely would have bought it before.
Right on the spot.
I also heard about these things, sun gloves. I was in a store in REI, and they had sun gloves, which are basically fingertipless gloves like I wear all the winter, but you do it for sun. And I don't like the feeling of sunscreen on my hands. And so I was like, ooh, sun gloves. I didn't know this was a thing, just to protect your hands from sun. But I didn't buy them because of No Spend February. And now I'm like, do I really need this? Because I have those shirts where you pull the sleeves of your hand. I'm like, is this just sort of like an overly particular thing? Or maybe I really would use them. I'm going to wait for the summer, though, and wait to see, do I think I need these? And then, okay, this is an issue. Okay, so I'm trying to do watercolor. I am doing watercolor this year. It's on my 24 for 24 list, and I'm doing it. But as I think often happens with people, my desire to buy supplies and to like sign up for online courses and get materials has kind of outstripped my practice. And so I'm like, I would like to try a Chinese brush. I would like to try a water sprayer. I would like to try gouache. But I didn't get them because of No Spend February. And so I think this reminded me what you need to do is focus on doing watercolor. And then if you're like, oh, wow, I would be very excited to try a Chinese brush, get it, but make sure that that is supporting a frequent practice of painting and not like, oh, I'm going to have the fun of getting the supplies.
Yes.
And like with the water sprayer, I really wanted the water sprayer. And then I looked around the apartment and I found we had a little bottle of, when you buy a set of glasses, sometimes they give you bottle lens cleanser in a spray bottle. And it was almost used up. There was just a little teeny part in the bottom. So I just washed that out. And I'm like, so this is a good example that if you don't buy something right away, you may find that you already have it or you have something that could work just as well. So that was, again, like having that delay taught me I don't need to buy this. I can repurpose it from something that I already have.
Yes, that is a whole section of this, which is buying a replacement for something that you already have. Like that happened with you, right?
Yeah, it was a 3-hole punch. So I used to have like this giant electric professional 3-hole punch, and then it broke and I didn't need it. And I had like a few pages that I wanted to punch, and I thought, oh, don't we have one lying around? In the past, I might have been like, oh, I'll just pick one up at the drugstore. But now I'm like, no, I really need to find it. And there were like 4 places where it could have been. And I found it. So again, it made me take the time and the effort to make sure that I really needed it. And in fact, I did not. So that was a good lesson. Always really, really, really look if you think there's any chance that you might already have something that could be useful.
And Gretchen, in an upcoming episode, we're going to share what listeners discovered about themselves in No Spend February. So everybody, let us know what you discovered about yourself.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be fascinating to hear. And also, if you're interested in this subject, there's a wonderful essay by Ann Patchett. We love Ann Patchett. We interviewed her on a book club episode 283. And her essay is called My Year of No Shopping. It was a New York Times opinion piece, and it also appears in her essay collection, These Precious Days. So if you want to go deep into no spend, that's a great essay about it.
Yes.
And now for a listener question. This is an interesting question related to the Happier Trifecta.
Yes. And if you don't know about the Happier Trifecta and the annual challenge, listen to episode 461. Okay, so this comes from Jonathan, who asks, I'm following along with hashtag Write24 and 24. This has actually been a breakthrough for me because I've always thought if I can't write for 5 hours, I shouldn't bother to write. And then I can never find the time. Now that I'm writing for 24 minutes with permission to stop at minute 25, I'm much more consistent. The problem is that sometimes I don't have any good ideas, so my writing isn't very good, and I end up editing it a lot or even cutting it later. How do I keep my quality higher so this time is spent on my best writing?
Well, Jonathan, that is the $1,000,000 question.
Yes, said every writer always, forever.
A lot of time writing is bad time writing.
Yes. Yes, writing is rewriting.
Writing is
and cutting. Writing is rewriting and deleting.
And writing is being frustrating because you're not having any good ideas.
Yeah. So you're doing everything right, Jonathan.
Yes. There it is.
You got to get through the bad to get to the good. So just keep doing your 24 minutes a day. And it's okay if you don't always have good ideas.
But also more good ideas tend to come the more you're writing. And so putting in the bad ideas often is what allows you to have the good ideas. And if you're not doing it at all, then you have neither good nor bad ideas. And so just understand it's part of the process. Yeah.
Yep.
Great question.
Yes. All right, Gretch, coming up, I have a book group to merit. But first, this break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run or maybe do yoga, meditate, watch an extra TV show, spend time with your family? Well, one way to really figure out your priorities in life is to go to therapy. I know in my life, Gretchen, whenever I've been in therapy, I've had such a clear vision of what is important to me and how to move forward and how to get in the things that I want to do.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/GretchenRubin today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/GretchenRubin.
Facebook, Instagram e WhatsApp são os apps da Meta que ajudam milhares de pessoas a fazer acontecer. A Lara começou a cuidar da saúde. O André começou uma profissão nova.
Saindo porção de coxinha.
E a Olivia fez uma festa surpresa.
Surpresa!
Pro seu gato.
Parabéns!
Fazer acontecer com os apps da Meta tá na sua mão.
Você costuma fazer seu treino ouvindo podcast? Ou é daqueles que, quando treina, não quer distração? E que tal no próximo treino ter mais conforto, amortecimento, mais energia e olha que mais sustentabilidade? Pois é, porque até na escolha do tênis para o seu treino, existe essa responsa. Energize sua corrida e com consciência. Visite on.com e compre agora o novo Cloud Monster 2.
Okay, Elizabeth, it's time for demerits and gold stars, and this week is your turn to talk about a demerit.
Okay, Gretch, I think anyone who's ever been in a book group might relate to this demerit. I'm in my Kidlit West
Yes.
book group, so we read Kidlit. And this session, I did not read the book selection in a timely manner. I had weeks to do it. I ordered the book. I got the book. I had it sitting right in front of me. I wanted to read it, and I just kept thinking, I have so much time. I'll read it closer so that it's fresh.
Yes.
And I didn't read it in a timely manner, and I did not get it read by the time I was supposed to. And that's just unforced error, Gretch.
Yeah, well, we've all done it.
Yes, we have.
You feel like you've got so much time, and then the time runs out. Or you lose it. Sometimes I'm just like, I know I have
where
it,
did
but
I put
where
that?
is it?
Yes. So that's my demerit. So hopefully saying it out loud will keep me from doing it again.
But also the Kidlit East, our motto is no guilt.
Yes.
And so it's always like, come if you've missed for a year. Come if you've
Yes.
never read the book. Like, no
Yes.
guilt, just come.
Yes, we have the same motto. All right, Gretch, what is your gold star?
Well, I want to give a gold star to wool socks because my feet are cold and it's cold here in New York City. And I was just wearing my usual notes to self socks, which I love from Kansas City, these great cotton socks. And my feet were cold, my feet were cold, my feet were cold. And then I thought, you know what? I think your feet are warmer if you wear wool socks. So I pulled out a pair of wool socks that I had. Didn't have to go out and buy them, which I could not have done. And guess what? Wool socks are warmer. Yes.
Revelation.
And it's just like, revelation. It's like, do I need to keep learning the same lesson over and over? Yes, indeed, I do. And so here it is again. This is why there are wool socks in my sock drawer. Why am I not wearing them? I do not know. But now they are in the rotation for the rest of the winter. So thank you, wool socks.
Yay, wool socks.
The resource for this week, again, the paperback of Life in 5 Senses is coming out. I'm so excited. If you are interested in pre-ordering the book and you're interested in reading the secret chapter, go to happiercast.com/secret chapter. And that's no space, no capitalizations, just secret chapter, one word. Elizabeth, what are we reading?
I am reading Catherine Called Birdie by Karen Cushman, my Kidlit book group selection, Gretch.
And I just finished, so I haven't started a new book yet, Missing May by Cynthia Ryland. And that's it for this episode of Happier. Remember to try this at home. Try having a tough conversation while walking. Let us know if you tried it and if it worked for you.
Thank you to our executive producer, Chuck Reed, and everyone at Cadence 13. Get in touch. Gretchen's on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and TikTok at Gretchen Rubin. And I'm on Instagram and Threads at Liz Craft.
And as always, here comes the reminder. Rate, review, follow, unpause, recommend to a friend. All these things really, really help to let new listeners know about the show.
Until next week, I'm Elizabeth Craft.
And I'm Gretchen Rubin. Thanks for joining us. Onward and upward.
Of course, there is one thing that the whole walking while stressful conversation doesn't work for, and that is getting plane tickets because, it's hard to get plane tickets while walking. And I find that to be very stressful to talk about.
In fact, I think all calendar logistics where it's like you get your calendar, I get my calendar,
Yes.
like let's go through our calendars. That you have to be sitting down for. That is true.
Yeah.
So that is a whole category of painful conversation.
Yes, it doesn't
Yes.
work.
It does not work. From the Onward Project.